Link together the art of human connection. My name's Leanne Isaacson and I would like to welcome you today. So whether you're watching live on Facebook or whether you're on YouTube, welcome. So today I have Induwa Cummings from the Gold Coast joining me today. So Induwa is passionate about empowering women and bring social change. And she's also the ambassador for the League of Extraordinary Women. So welcome, Induwa. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Leanne. My pleasure.
So Induwa, look, so you're on the Gold Coast. I'm here in Adelaide in South Australia, and our producer Rob is in Baltimore in the US. So our worlds look absolutely, poles apart. And so can you just, we have a map on the screen at the moment of, where each of us are. And again, it always amazes me that we can do these live shows and bring, that I can bring amazing people to for everyone else to see. So can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to being on the Gold Coast? And that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's interesting while you're talking about us all being the three of us on the show here today, being from different locations. I definitely consider myself as a citizen of the globe, and I love that technology has made the world a much smaller place. We moved to the Gold Coast about 15 months ago after living at the coast of Bundaberg. We lived there for 12 years, which we'd moved from the Canberra before that. So we've lived in quite a few places. Oh, there's our backyard. That was literally our backyard where we lived in Bundaberg. And it was a real lifestyle, quality of life move for us from there, because we'd always had the beach and family at the top of our list of where we wanted to move to from Canberra, which is probably as cold as Baltimore, Rob. It was a lovely little town. It was about 50,000 people. The girls, we've got two girls, they grew up pretty much rambling along the coastline there. They had sea cucumbers as their friends, and they all had their names. Manta rays, watched turtles hatch. That was pretty much life there. So, yeah, it was a great time. But they're older and now, and my husband also travels a lot for work. So the move to the Gold Coast was a bit of a practical one, just to access ease of travel with one single plane trip as opposed to connecting flights to Bundaberg. But yeah, loved our time there. Yeah.
And I know one of the things you and I were just talking about before is how we actually came to even know each other, and it was through LinkedIn, as pretty much everyone on my Link Together show has. That's how I've connected with them. But I was thinking the other day, how do we actually connect? And I think it was a post that you'd actually put up that. We were second level connections, and just through one of my connections that had either liked it or commented on it, I came across your posts and started to read some of them and sort of looked at your profile and then we reached out to each other and connected. So like I said, it was one of those things, and then we had a Skype call. So the LinkedIn maze certainly can bring us some amazing connections. And I know when I was looking at your profile, one of the things that struck me was, just the range of things that you've done over the time. So, you got into property development. That must have been an interesting sort of, experience. And I know that was one of the things that you said that you were quite passionate about. Just how did that happen?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, if I look at everything up till now, probably my time in property development was my favorite probably job, if I call it that. I haven't actually been an employee for 17 years. I am totally unemployable. So actually, I tried that and lasted 2 days, and it didn't work. I had done the corporate thing earlier in Sydney, but property development. I fell into it, I think, because I just had my first child. I knew I didn't want to go back to work, and I actually originally had ideas of being an architect when I was at school. So I'd always just, I guess, had that creativity and want to transform. Some of the strategy I worked with was was renovations, and I used to buy blocks of units and then strata title them, renovate them, and sell them off one by one. And I also did some, I guess, selling development blocks, so I'd get the DA approval in, and then normally builders or developers would do the building part. So yeah, so I did that for about 12 years, and then you know, silly stories you tell yourself in your head. I felt like I hadn't ever built a business, so that's when I decided to set up the recruiting business in maritime and do executive recruitment in that space. Yeah.
And that was actually going to be my next question. I mean, I imagine property development's not something that I have experience with, but farming certainly is what I've my experience from pretty much most of my life, and and then looking at you going into the maritime recruiting, that would be probably a fairly male-dominated area, as the world that I worked within, coordinating education for farmers, and so that was very much a male a male world. So how did you manage to gain the respect from the maritime perspective? How did you end up? How did you fall into that?
Yeah, I guess the whole male-dominated world or female-dominated world has never been something that actually, I guess, enters my mind when I'm thinking of doing something. Because property was very male-orientated as well, but then recruitment earlier was very female-oriented. Luckily, I didn't have a life, and I spent Saturday nights watching YouTube clips after YouTube clips as to what azimuth drives do, what a Z drive is, and all the fun stuff about vessels and different types of vessels, and just spending time with people. LinkedIn was also really helpful at that time, because I just connect with people that looked like they were professionals in the field, and just ask them questions, or if I was in that city, I'd organise to meet with them. So it was, I probably would have found it really difficult, actually, without having that social media platform to make connections and learn. Yeah.
So how long have you been on LinkedIn? Like, has it been like a number of years, and how did you come to LinkedIn?
I did it when I started the maritime the role, that business. So it'd be about 7 years then, I think. Yeah, probably about 7 years. And I built up quite a number of connections. I had nearly 6,000 connections, but I've actually been going through and culling some of those now, because it's a different world that I'm operating now. From maritime to a social enterprise and working with women in developing countries is like night and day. And I know that there's some people from there that have followed me with my new views and the values that I'm putting out there with my content. But yeah, there's plenty there that I probably we don't share the same passions anymore. So definitely wanting to do more regular.
It's actually interesting, because the size network that I have, and being on LinkedIn for 10 years, so certainly there's a lot of people that I connected with early in the piece that certainly are probably not the close connections that they were when I first joined. I mean, one of the challenges is always trying to how you actually cull. It's always, that sounds a terrible word, doesn't it? But how you actually cull connections. On LinkedIn, it's not the easiest thing to do, from a search, how you actually do it. But yeah, that is interesting, when you do sort of change career paths, and that connections aren't necessarily as relevant as what they were. So
I was just going to say, you're right. Maybe we should think of a more positive way of saying cull. Maybe it should be like improve the quality connections as opposed to culling, because that sounds nasty.
Yeah, I know, culling, and especially as a farmer, like I from a culling perspective, I probably have a completely different take on that as well. So it's certainly So improving the quality of connections is a good way a good way of looking at it. So as far as I know that you're involved in the League of Extraordinary Women. How did that come to be?
Yeah, well, when I moved to the Gold Coast, moving to the Gold Coast was like a bit of a line in the sand for me. Lots of things changed for when we came down here, and one of those was, I guess, releasing that role that I had in maritime, and And basically, I wanted to have connection with women. After being 5 years in that maritime environment, I knew I really needed to get that yin side of me. So I just sought out different meets that had women. And yep, there we go. There's a photo of me at one of my events. So I started attending as a guest, and then the role came up for ambassador, and the previous ambassador nominated me, and I thought, yeah, that sounds great, because I'd done events before and knew that I loved doing that. So I thought, well, that'd be a great way for me to meet more people and do something that I enjoy doing. So so this event that you've got up on the screen there was one that I did for it was a panel of social entrepreneurs. So you've got there 3 amazing women. One of them is Erica Bartle, the CEO of Outland Denim, and they actually produce denim in Cambodia, and they've trained women that have been rescued from trafficking to sew. And I'm going to get emotional here. So it's pretty incredible what they do. They source sustainably their denim from Turkey and don't use any toxic bleaches, because denim is terrible. It's notorious for the amount of toxins that they use in their chemical process to dye the denim. So they've looked at everything in their supply, from the actual materials that they use to the process that they make and the labour that they use, and I guess the difference that it makes in the lives of those women that they employ. Because the problem they've had with rescuing traffickers in the past is that if they don't have any alternative employment to go to, it's really easy for them to go back into it. So that's what they're trying to do with their whole aim of Outland Denim. And the other 2 ladies are Mia Monroe and Kylie Lowe. Mia, they're all local Gold Coast people too. Mia has an online education program to actually educate business owners or entrepreneurs or people entrepreneur, to use that term, that want to show how they can use a profitable model that still solves some social problems. Because I know that was the question that I often had, is how does that work, that you start actually helping the community but it doesn't affect your bottom line? And so there are ways that actually happens. And, you know, that sometimes I think being forced to think things differently, you get creative about how you do it, and actually ends up being profitable in many ways, whether it's for people or the planet or financially. And the other lady, Kylie Lowe, she has a social enterprise to help at youth youth that are at risk. So yeah, amazing as well. So yeah, so that was a really powerful night, actually.
Because I actually hadn't heard of the League of Extraordinary Women before until I came across your and connected with you on LinkedIn. So that is an Australian, that's an Australian organisation? Yeah.
The movement started in Melbourne about 5 years ago by 4 women that were, I guess, making the change into the entrepreneurial startup space. And they met and found that they were all having the similar struggles of balance and how do you make this work. And so they just decided to meet together. And the first meeting, they just put it on Facebook. They had 160 women turn up. So they thought, oh, okay, there's obviously a need here. So the values are very much around real connections, supporting each other, not having a competitive spirit. It doesn't matter if you're in the same industry. We have these values around there's enough business for everyone. So yeah, if you think the same way, then that's the group that the League inspires. And I really like the culture of women that it's attracted. It seems to have flowed out, whether you're at the Gold Coast or the Brisbane or the Melbourne movement, or they're in California now too. I don't know if they have an Adelaide movement. Maybe you can ring one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I did wonder that. I sort of had a bit of a look, and I haven't had enough chance to sort of dig too deeply to see whether there is. But I'd certainly love to be involved. But that's a story for another day. So I know that they organise events. Like there was the event in Melbourne in July. Like, did you attend that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In Melbourne, that was Run the World. I love that name. You can't help but sing Beyonce when you sing that. They don't hear that. But they had some great speakers there. There were 10 women that spoke. And interestingly enough, a third of those speakers were from the Gold Coast area. Woo! So we actually have the two of the sisters that spoke at that Run the World event in Melbourne are going to speak for us here locally at the Gold Coast next week. And that's Vic and Emma from The Beach People. And they have a global online business as well. Actually, if you've heard of the round beach towel that's fringed, they were the girls that invented that. And now everyone's copied it.
So how many women were at that event in Melbourne?
I think there was about 400. There was about 400 there, and we get about 80 people locally.
Okay. And so how often are they held?
We do those events every 6 weeks. So we've got the one next week here at the Gold Coast, and then we've got one in at Christmas time, of course. So yeah, we found that every month was a little bit too much for people, and just scheduling 6 weeks worked really well. Yeah.
So that probably leads me to I'm not quite sure how much we talked about your where you were born and grew up. So can you tell us a little bit about your homeland?
Okay, sure. Yes, I was born in Papua New Guinea. My mum and dad were both teaching up there. So dad's Australian, so he'd gone up there to teach, and mum was actually one of the first women to graduate as a teacher in Papua New Guinea. Which is pretty amazing in itself, that she came from a village and with no running water, no electricity, single father raised her, and yet he saved up enough money to send her to teachers college, which was in a time where even women in Australia probably weren't being encouraged to actually get tertiary degrees. It was the 50s, 60s. My grandfather was definitely a man of vision. So he sent mum to teachers college. Mum and dad met there. I was born in Papua New Guinea, in Goroka in the highlands, but I only stayed there till I was about 2 or 3, and so then pretty much I've grown up in Australia in lots of different locations. So I guess that's why I say when people ask where I'm from, I'm a citizen of the globe, but my heart's in Papua New Guinea, and I happen to live at the Gold Coast, which I love living here too.
So the town the area that you grew up in and have the the connection to now, can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, my family, my people in Papua New Guinea are from Kokoda, and you may have heard of Kokoda in World War II, the Kokoda trial, where they had a number of infamous battles. So my family are landowners from that area. So all my family from my mother's side still live there. There's a picture on the screen there now. So they still live a traditional life of living off the land, eating what they grow. It's obviously all organic. They wash in the river, laugh in the river, fish in the river. They have no electricity or running water. They do have solar lights now, but ironically, everyone has a mobile phone. So it's pretty crazy. They'll be cooking at the fire in one hand and the mobile in the other hand. It's worlds colliding. But because of the resource sector that's moved into there, then communications is really important for them. So, they've been happy to put the towers in, but I guess the rest still is as it was, perhaps hundreds of years ago, that subsistence lifestyle.
I was just going to ask, so they're your two girls in the photo. So who was the little boy?
A little boy was my nephew. Yeah, so my cousin's son. It's funny, in Papua New Guinea language, we don't actually have a word for cousin. It's all brother and sister. So it's like how we would choose, brothers and sisters and nephews here is exactly how they treat family in Papua New Guinea. That second removal of cousin doesn't exist.
Yeah, and so how often would you go back there?
Oh, not enough, because I'll go to Port Moresby, which is the capital city of Papua New Guinea, for work, but I won't travel over to my village as much as what I get up to Port Moresby. So I'm going up to Port Moresby again for work at the end of November, so I'm seeing how I might be able to duck in a couple of days back at the village. Yeah,
And so, sorry, how far is the village from Port Moresby?
In kilometres, it's actually not that far, because that's actually the trail that people walk is from Port Moresby to Kokoda. And so that's like a 7-day trip, because it's incredible terrain. Like, it's literally up and down mountains the whole way.
Yeah.
It's a 25-minute trip in a, I guess it's Dash 8, that we go over there. But then once we arrive at Popondetta, which is the closest town to my village, then it's like a 3-hour trip in a truck, which is like insane, you know, 4-wheel drive type thing, because there's no roads. Some of it's bitumen, but half of it's in dirt. It's only 50 kilometres from Popondetta to my village, but it takes you about 3 hours in the truck.
Yeah, and I must admit, just thinking about, you know, the Kokoda Trail, like I think I just said to you when we first were talking earlier that my great uncle, you know, was involved in the Kokoda Trail, and so it's certainly something that, you know, over my lifetime, you know, as a little kid, and you know, one of my cousins, I remember talking to him about, you know, he was always quite keen to actually go back and walk the Kokoda Trail, you know, because of my Uncle Jack. You know, we heard about that as, you know, what they did when they were young. So yeah, you know, when I saw that on, you know, I think on your profile, or, you know, in our discussions, it certainly was something that, again, you know, is so far removed from my world, you know, here, you know, from a physical perspective, but it's certainly something that, in my heart is quite important. So that probably leads me to asking, as far as your involvement and your plans to actually go back and work with empowering women over in Papua New Guinea. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, I over the last 15 months since we moved to the Gold Coast, I stopped my work in recruitment, and I've really just been, I guess, spending time with the family and helping them adjust to the move here, and also doing a lot of personal development myself, and just seeing, I guess, what evolved, because I knew that there was something bigger that I was going to do that certainly made an impact, and I knew that whatever I did, I guess, on a financial reward basis, I wanted it to be something that actually made a change, not just, I guess, an enterprise. And in the last month, that's become, I guess, it's come to me with 2 opportunities with working with education with my mother. She brings students down from Papua New Guinea to Australia to attend tertiary, I guess, education here, universities and TAFEs. But the bigger project that I'm going to be working on is with my business partner, Security Nayan, on setting up an event and a model for women in developing nations. You know, professional women, entrepreneurial women, and certainly those that want to be that, and encouraging those skills around professional development and leadership. But the model that we set up in Papua New Guinea, we're going to roll out to developing nations around the world. So since Security's from India, that will be our next stop.
That's like, and that to me that sounds so exciting. And as far as, you know, so what will that look like? Is that, you know, will that be an event? Will it be, you know, what will that look like? So from somebody, say, that was either wanting to from another country support what you're doing, or, you know, from the perspective of participants in PNG. So what will that look like?
Yeah, there'll be, I guess there'll be an opportunity for corporates to get involved in sponsorship, as well as, you know, we'll be talking with government bodies as well that really want to support the women's space. I guess globally, people are really getting behind supporting women, because yes, they know that when they empower a woman, it has such a ripple and multiplier effect to the impact that it makes in a community. Women tend to be educators and teachers naturally. That's part of us. So yeah, I know that certainly a lot of companies and the government are supportive of events that can have leverage to their investment in this space. So we're going to have a number of focuses, because, you know, there's limitless subjects that we could talk on, but we really want to focus on personal development and empowerment. You know, that's something that women in lots of developing nations, you know, really need, with, I guess, a lot of them being typically misogynist societies. We also want to support leadership. and the qualities around leadership, and just that humanity of leadership too, and setting examples and being strong examples in yourself before you lead others, and really having a social outlook with entrepreneurship. So encouraging women to set up small businesses, whether they're solopreneurs and doing something for themselves, or whether they go out and get other women and men together to set up businesses, but setting up businesses that can solve social problems, because governments in developing nations, there's no way, well, even in the Western world, governments struggle to have enough in their budget to solve all the community problems, and that's why charities evolve. But the social entrepreneurship has a lot more sustainable and long-term solutions by solving those with a commercial model. So we'd really like to encourage women in developing nations to set that up. So if those values align with your company, or I guess with the government department, then certainly we'd love to hear from you and see how we can work together in bringing these events and mentoring programs to your country.
And I think, like the more that we've talked, the more the way my mind works is thinking, okay, so now who do I know that, could help, facilitate that, or who do I know that might be able to have some ideas of funding? And so I know from, sitting here thinking now, what connections have I got in Papua New Guinea? And I know I was actually looking last night, and I think I've got four first level connections in New Guinea, and I think in my whole network there's about 117,000 in my LinkedIn network. So I'm sure that there's certainly some people that I can do some connecting with. But and I think like from the perspective of being able to like both connect funders, but also to engage people over in both New Guinea, but also when you talk about India, and other developing countries, it's certainly a really exciting project to be doing. So from a time frame perspective, like, is that how long is that going to be taking?
We'd like to put the event on in Papua New Guinea in the first half of next year. So we're just, when I go over to Papua New Guinea in this visit in November, and we have got some meetings with corporates and governments that we already know want to be involved. I guess we'll be looking at perhaps looking at their perspectives. So there's also a major event that APEC is meeting in Papua New Guinea next year, plus Sakurudi, who I work with. She's got 2 global events that she also is involved in next year in Geneva and Paris. So we've kind of got to fit in with a couple of those things, but we definitely like to be in the first half of next year.
Oh, that's fantastic. There's probably lots of other things. So as far as just thinking about the League of Extraordinary Women, is that is the League involved in anything that you're doing over there, or is this just in your own right?
This will be our own initiative. Developing Nations is a really different perspective and very different, very different focus as to what we need to deliver in that space. So this is something that we're building specifically for women in those sorts of countries and environments. With the experience that Socrates had, Socrates only moved to Sydney 4 months ago. Prior to that, was living in India and had done similar programs for encouraging women to enter politics. And also around education in really regional, I hate the word poverty-stricken, but really regional areas that needed that. So she's been at the grassroots of that. So her input will be invaluable, as will be the input that we're getting from speaking with women in Papua New Guinea, because we want to make sure that it's relevant, and we certainly don't want to have the approach, of that colonial type approach where we come in and thinking that we know all the answers. That's not it at all. We really want to partner with the women. We really want to understand, where they're at and what they best would gain the most value from, and then bring what we can to work with that. Because one of the things that I think strongly we want to have as a fourth pillar to our movement is a connection to traditions and a connection to culture. because I think whether you're a partner of a law firm or whether you're setting up a grassroots traditional arts business, I really believe that connection to where you come from is integral to going forward as an individual. And it's individuals that we're going to empower to go forward and make their own changes, just one woman at a time.
I must admit, I almost want to end on that statement. But one thing, sorry, just taking back a couple of steps was, so how did you actually meet? So how did you come to be involved with Suki?
I guess I'm a really strong believer in pulling your tribe. It's a common term that's used at the moment, and I really believe that the right people that need to support you in what you're doing will be attracted to you. So she just randomly contacted me on LinkedIn, and I looked at her profile and I thought, oh wow, there's a lot of commonalities there. So we organised, a little bit like yourself, we organised a time to talk on the phone, and it was a 90-minute conversation with which every single thing that we both said to each other, we were just like, oh yes, and oh, what about? And if she was a man, I'd probably marry her, but I'm actually already married, can't do that. Okay, bigamy. I guess we were in very similar situations that she'd cut off her, she's amazing. She runs a data and robotics company in India and was voted one of the 5 top women in tech to watch in India. And if you know how strong the IT culture is in India, that's no mean feat. So, and she's also on the global committee for Women in Communications Forum that meets in Geneva every year. So she's, she's got that same global outlook. She loves doing events. She loves women. And she has a heart and an intention that's the same as mine, that's about making a change, and the rest will follow, which is something that was very important to me, because often people are motivated by different things, and our motivation is certainly around change and women, and whatever happens from there happens from there.
That it's just an amazing story, and I think it probably reminds me of again, how you and I connected. It was one of those, looking at a post and feeling like there was certainly an alignment, and and again, that just shows the absolute power of LinkedIn. And I certainly say so many times how lucky we are to live in an age with the technology that enables us to connect and really form deep connections and relationships with people, no matter what the geography, no matter what the background, no matter what the age, no matter what the industry. We are just so fortunate that we have the ability to connect with people that we would never in a million years, come across, at all. So I think that it certainly is amazing.
It's interesting. It's I was just talking with Rob about this before, that it's almost like that platforms like LinkedIn or I guess Blab, where you and Rob met, it's almost like it gives humans permission to do what innately we want to do as humans, which is connect. And somehow in our society and in the outside world, there seems to be a fear attached to talking to strangers and connecting with them in the way that online you feel like you've been allowed to do that. Because I imagine if you and Rob had sat on a train and you just started chatting and talking about craziness and you used your perspective word 10 times, you'd probably just think you were free. So, I love that whatever allowances these social platforms have given us have allowed us to connect to what humans really want to do. I, on the other hand, have no trouble talking to strangers, and my girls always give me a hard time about, oh, of course you picked up that hitchhiker and brought them home and they're staying with us for 2 days, and talking to the lady at the bus stop that is now coming along to your event at the League of Extraordinary Women. But that's the Papua New Guinea way.
Well, I'm not quite sure whether it's I think it might also be a country, that reminds me. I do that all the time. I was sitting on a plane coming back from, I don't know, Sydney, I think, and I happened to be sitting next to a girl from the US, and somehow, started talking to her, and well, she was coming to see a friend of hers that had just moved to Adelaide, and so I said, "Oh, look, that's okay. I'll, we can take you down to her place," because she was going to be catching a bus into the city and then another bus out. So, my daughter picked me up, and so there was two of us, this other person in the car, and I said, "Oh, it's all right. I just met her on the plane, and no, we'll drop you there." So it certainly, I have no problem talking to strangers either, and hence, from a LinkedIn perspective, it as far as connecting with people, and I always figure you just never know, someone's story, or how you might be able to help someone, or how you can connect, and whether it be from a professional level, a personal level, whichever, and the two are so intricately entwined, being professional and being personal. And I think that at the moment, the way that that LinkedIn has changed, just even in the last couple of months, with the advent of being able to actually upload video, and we really now have the ability to really show people who we are, and show your personality, and not that you have to reveal everything that you have for dinner and what you did on the weekend, but it certainly is, being able to share personal stories and connect on a human to human basis is really what the platform has now developed into.
Even there is no B2C. People used to say B2B, B2C anymore. There is no B2B anymore. It's people to people. People want to do business with people that they like, and it's another reminder of being really authentic and true in your content that you post, in the profile that you have. Put it out there as to who you are. And I think that was something that I struggled in my maritime life. I really felt like I was this woman that could speak the language and was part of the maritime world, but inside I had really strong motivations around changing the world and humanity and social change. So, which was why I do what I do now, and had the 15-month break of doing nothing. So yeah, it's really important to just, I guess, bring your whole self to your business or whatever it is that you do.
I must admit, I laugh when you say 15 months of doing nothing. I actually was working for a cancer centre for 18 months, and I've actually just done the opposite, jumped out of that and got back into being who I am, and being able to help as many people in my passion and connecting. And so it's an interesting parallel where you say you've been doing nothing for 15 months, but effectively I'm sure you haven't been doing nothing.
Yeah. Mother of 2 teenage daughters that are sporty mad, social mad, taxiing everywhere, and the ambassador of the League of Extraordinary Women and ambassador of Miyako, and other stuff, but
Well, look, thank you. I'm not quite sure from a time perspective, but you and I could probably sit here and talk all day and go off on all sorts of different tangents, and we could well and truly change the world without a doubt. But look, so thank you. So now if people would like to get in touch with you as far as supporting what you're doing over in whether with the League of Extraordinary Women, but also with the work that you and Suki are about to embark on over back in Papua New Guinea and also India. So if people wanted to get in touch with you to either provide support from a financial perspective, or how they can support you and support the women in both those countries. So how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, look, we haven't even set up our webpage yet. So really probably the easiest way is LinkedIn, because there's only one Induwa Cummings on there, INDUWA. If the message of what we're trying to do with women on a global scale and developing nations rings true with what you'd like to do, and however you may feel like you'd like to support it, then love to hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much. It's just been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so glad that I had a first level connection that was connected to you, that I was able to come across your post and that we could connect. So thanks very much. Again, thank you to Rob Hix, who is our wonderful producer, who has given me an absolute hard time today because I'm not quite sure whether anyone's noticed, but I tend to say the word perspective a lot. And so it's been brought to my attention. So Rob, very kindly in the background, has got a cup who's been dropping coins into that cup every time that I've said the word perspective. So today, every now and then, you know, I look like I've lost a fraction of train of thought. It's because there's been a coin dinging in the background that no one else can hear, only Induwa and I. So anyway, thanks very much, Rob. You've just been a gem today and provided us with all sorts of entertainment. So look, again, thanks very much, you know, for viewing the show linked together, The Art of Human Connection live. For anyone that's watching the recording, look, thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to bringing some amazing guests again in the coming weeks. And again, Induwa, thanks so much. It's been fabulous. Thank you. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. So Leanne Isaacson on LinkedIn. And if anyone has any suggestions for guests for my Linked Together show, I'd be more than happy to, you know, to have people suggested. And we've had some amazing guests up until now. I mean, one of the things that probably a lot of people don't know is that Bill, from Alaskan Viewpoint Lodge in Fairbanks in Alaska, as a result of the show that I did with Bill, a connection of mine on LinkedIn happened to see the interview and was planning to go to Alaska, so actually connected with Bill and has booked at the Alaskan Viewpoint Lodge. So you know, while the show, I have amazing guests, but you know, there's certainly been some outcomes that probably weren't expected when I first started doing it. So my aim is really just to show that LinkedIn is a professional platform, but certainly is built of is 500 million humans on LinkedIn, and it's about actually how we connect and how we bring that human aspect into our professional and personal world. So again, thanks very much, and I look forward to bringing you another great show next week.